Jaime very graciously gave me permission to preach longer at the second service than I preached at the first service. If this seems a little long, don't blame me, okay? That's right. Because, whenever the preacher gets told he can talk longer, he does. There are rules about that sort of thing. So, about a month ago, we started talking, as we were talking with the children, about grace. And we learned some things about grace. And what we've decided grace is that grace is God's radical act that changes everything. So repeat after me. God's radical act. Changing everything. All right. Now, we talked about how grace is that act of getting something we don't deserve. Right? We don't deserve it. But we also understand that God's gift of grace comes to us even if we don't deserve it. So turn to a neighbor and tell them, you don't deserve it. But you get it anyway. All right. Robert, I seem to have a whistle in my ear from the microphone.
We're working on it.
Thank you. I figure if I have it in my ear, you might have it in your ear, and that's not a good thing. So I'm going to tell them about it. We learned that grace, no matter what, no matter how hard you try, no matter what you do, you can't earn it. Doesn't matter. You also learned that grace is about getting and giving a second chance. How many of you still think you want to have that second chance in life? Absolutely. Most of us live there, don't we? How many of you would like to have a second chance at Thanksgiving dinner? Those of you whose hands are not up probably aren't telling the truth. Now, I know that some of you are going, well, we don't need to eat that much again. But how many of us need to celebrate Thanksgiving again and again in our lives? It's true, isn't it? I like that. They even raised their hands and I didn't have to cue you. That really makes the preacher smile. After we talked about how grace is something that you can't earn, something that you don't deserve, and it's something that you really have no control over, I threw us a curveball saying there are some things about grace that you do have a control over, and that is your attitude about grace. Now, some of you, I did this in the first service, some of you, well, all of you have an attitude about grace. Here are your options. You can choose which one. Some of you go like this. Grace. I don't need it. Don't want it. Guess what? Not going to get it either. Some of us have this attitude about grace. Oh God, give me grace. I'm so deserving. Not getting it either. Some of us say, grace. I need it, Lord. I need it. I need it. I need it. But don't give it to my friend. You see, there's something about grace. We want to decide who gets it. And we always want it to be us. But somehow we think that grace is like the gasoline in your car's gas tank. You think that if God keeps giving it out and giving it out and giving it out and giving it out and giving it out, it's going to be burned up, burned up, burned up, burned up, and eventually the tank's going to run dry. And the fact of the matter is, from the beginning of time until this very moment, the tank never will or has run dry. Because God's grace isn't controlled by us. And somebody should say, thank God. Now, most of us have attitudes, and we've talked about how those attitudes are affecting us. And the really good news about attitudes, do y'all remember what the really good news about attitudes are? We get to choose them. When you wake up in the morning, you get to decide whether you're going to have a good attitude or a bad attitude. When you wake up in the morning, you're going to get to decide if you're going to have attitudes of grace, which include thanksgiving and generosity and love, or if you're going to have attitudes of hatred and want. Attitudes, we know, are so important in our lives. They either build those walls that keep people out, or they build bridges that bring people together. And determines the success and failure of every relationship that you have. Now, last week we narrowed our focus down on an attitude because it was Thanksgiving, and we talked about how Thanksgiving, how thankfulness was important as an attitude of grace. I'm going to tell you that the other two attitudes, generosity and love, are just as important. But we spend our time on Thanksgiving because Scripture is so explicit. 71 times we're told to praise God, to give God thanks. 69 more times we're told to bring a thank offering to the Lord. Over and over and over again. I mean, quite frankly, if somebody tells you something 3 times, you're pretty sure that it's important. But I'm thinking if somebody tells us 130 plus times to do something, that it's really, really, really important. Turn to a neighbor and tell them it's important. We even saw that God commanded it 5 times in one psalm. And the psalm's only 5 verses long. God commanded thanksgiving from us in these ways. He says, shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. And you all were deathly afraid I was going to make you shout. I'm still tempted. Secondly, we're told, serve the Lord with gladness. Thirdly, come before him with joyful songs. Fourthly, know that the Lord is God. It is he who has made us, and we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. And fifthly, enter his courts with thanksgiving. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. 5 times in 5 verses we're told to bring our praise and thanksgiving to God in 5 short verses. But that brings me to today's question. Who is it that gets to command anything from us? Who is it that all of us in this room would bow down to and say, okay, I'll do it your way? Now, I ask those kind of as rhetorical questions, but in your mind, you're already answering them, and you're answering them with the right answer. Who is it that can command us? God. Well, maybe they would say that. How about you? Who is it that's telling us? Oh, thank you. You had more energy than they did. Boy, we have to do jumping jacks next Sunday morning before church. Yeah, it sounds painful, doesn't it? You see, most of the time when we think about Thanksgiving, we don't think about it as a command. We don't think that somebody's told us to do it. Well, the fact of the matter is, it's really clear in Scripture that we are told to do it by God. And that makes it really important. You know, if your mother tells you to do something, it's important. If your father tells you something, that's important. When God tells you to do something, it probably ought to be even higher up on the priority list. Of course, I had that conversation with my father once, and he was not impressed. Of course, I was a pretty smart aleck kid, and I was just pulling his chain, and he knew it. So who gets to command anything from or to us? We say in our heads and in our minds, God. So let's talk about that for Because that's how we come to grace in the King. Because in reality, only a king can really command anything. Now, is anybody just a little concerned? Most of us are going, king. That's language you don't hear in church very often, except at Christmas, by the way. We hear it a lot at Christmas. And it's almost Advent, so we're going to start hearing this language. Only a king can command anything from us. So that takes us to the next question. Who gets to be our king? Now, before you answer, because you're going to get a chance to answer this question, I want you to think about this question very carefully. Now, it seems like a simple question, who gets to be our king? But the fact of the matter is, it's important for us to realize that just like an attitude, we are blessed in that we get to decide, we get to choose who our king is. That's right. You get to choose. It's not like those old-time movies when like the Three Musketeers, that's kind of my favorite one. The king enters the room and everybody kneels or bows. The women in those dresses do that cute little curtsy thing. I never did that. It's probably a good thing. Always looked like it would hurt. But you know what was happening? They bow down, they curtsy, they lower their eyes, because the king was important. The king was the one we were pledging our allegiance to. Oh, this is getting harder. Because I know most of you went to school somewhere, and you probably did the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. But when's the last time you took a pledge to someone? No, if you got married, you took a pledge there. That's a reminder. Especially for those men who forgot. Pledges count. Who do we pledge our allegiance to? In our lives, I'm going to tell you, don't answer yet, because in our lives, there are all kinds of competition going on for our allegiance. You all understand that? There are all kinds of things asking for our allegiance. For example, there are people who want to be king of your life. Now, you have to come up with your own names, but I bet you can. Now, some of you immediately went to the political world, and that's true. But that's not the only place. There are people all over wanting to be king of other people's lives so they have someone to tell what to do and how to do it. But it isn't just people. There are also things that are wanting to be king of our life. Now, how do I know that? Well, I watch football over the weekend. That's how I know. You didn't know that you could learn who wants to be king of your life by watching television, did you? Well, my friend Gene and I were watching one of the late football games last night, and we noticed right away that one of the things that wants to be king of our life is our desire for things. I don't know if you noticed, from the week before until yesterday, the commercial scheme changed. Went from 7 commercials to 12 in the same amount of time. Yes, it did. I also learned that some of you need a new car. Do you know how I noticed that? In the same set of commercials for a whole half hour of this football game, Gene and I decided we would count. Every other commercial was for a car. So my conclusion is that some of you must need a new car. There are other things that want to be kings of our lives. Cash. Bring us your title, we'll give you cash. Go to this place and we'll give you cash. Bring us your gold, we'll give you cash. It's amazing. I always wish I had gold. I might turn some of it into cash. Of course, this day, that'd be a good thing at $1,740 an ounce. It's supposed to still go up this year. There are other things that want to be, or will be, king of our lives. Some of us have addictions that want to be king of our lives. There are things that we bow down to so we can function during the day. Some of us have families that are king of our lives. You didn't know that it can be more than one. I know people who give up everything in their world because their family says they should do it, even though they know their family's wrong. Don't ruffle the law. Don't walk. There's stuff going on in every family. I know because even in my family there's stuff going on. We don't have time. Even that would be longer than what Jaime wanted me to preach if I just told you about the stuff going on in my family. My family's little. My extended family's pretty big. And most of the stuff going on that's affecting us right now is circled around us in the extended family. The problem is what's going on extends back about 135 years. And I can't go back and fix it. And so we get mixed messages. Any of you ever get a mixed message from your family? It goes like this. Here's the mixed message. You really should do something about that. Don't rock the boat. You really should do something about it. Don't rock the boat. Maybe you recognize this picture? And guess what's happening? The family has then become king of your life because you're going. Yeah. And you know what else it is? It's mind-boggling and numbing and absolutely a problem. Because we're supposed to love our families. We're supposed to respect our parents and honor them, and our parents are supposed to not do things to their children that make them go crazy. Some of you have children. Some of you have children older than I am, and you're still driving them crazy. Stop it. Thought I'd say a pastoral word. Some of you have parents. Be nicer. Be nicer. And love them. There are people all around us who want to be our kings. There are things getting in our way that want to be our kings. But the fact of the matter is, and now you can answer the question, who is it that as followers of Jesus we are to call our king? Can anybody be just a little bit more excited? Let me try that again. Maybe I'm not saying it well. You know, I've already done this once today, and the response was better at the early service. There are people who want to be king of our lives. There are things that we're allowing to be king of our lives, but as followers of Jesus Christ, who is really supposed to be Lord and King of our life? God. Thank you, Jesus. Listen, I know that I'm hard on us as a congregation sometimes. Okay. You know, no, I won't go there. The sermon just about got really long. Listen, yes, I'm hard on us as a congregation all the time because God has great expectations for us. Remember, we've been talking about for 2.5 months what God expects of us. And what God expects of us is for us to make Him King of our lives. So when I ask that question, there is no doubt, no wavering, no wishy-washiness about who is Lord of our life, who is King of our kingdom. Because let me tell you something, when Jesus is King of our lives, some amazing things happen. When Jesus is King of our lives, we are free. Remember that in the Gospel of John? John says, the truth will set you free. And who is the truth? It's Jesus. So what are we freed from? Well, just from Romans alone, we are freed from corruption, from law, and from sin. That's pretty good just for one book. Biblical Greek tells us that to be set free is to become exempt from liability. So in other words, if we just take what's in Romans, we're set free so we're no longer accountable or liable for the law. Doesn't mean we don't have to abide by it, but we aren't judged by it. And that's good news, because as I've been corrected, the 613 laws, you all aren't very good at keeping them. Neither am I. If we just read what's here in Romans, we're set free from slavery to corruption. In other words, we don't have to live with the evilness in the world around us. We're freed from that. We're free to live a life of goodness and righteousness. Then there's the big one. This is in the 6th chapter of Romans. We are set free from our slavery to sin. In other words, that bad stuff that you've been doing, you don't have to do anymore. And better than that, we, you, me, the person sitting next to you, the people in the choir, are set free from the condemnation that comes because of it. That's what happens when we choose to make the giver of grace into our king. We're set free. We're set free from fear. How many of you are afraid of anything? I know some of you are afraid of spiders. Jesus' death on the cross sets you free from being afraid of spiders. Did you know that? It does. We're set free from any fear. Maybe you are afraid of death or of loss or of poverty or of rejection. Maybe you're afraid of being alone in this life. Because of Jesus, we don't have to be afraid of those things, because we're set free. We're set free from evil and its power. Do you know that evil has power? Evil has power that wants to change your life to evil. My favorite thing that we're set free from, and this is becoming more important to me almost every single day. We're set free from loneliness. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 18 and 19 tell us that we are reconciled to Jesus so that we can become part of a reconciliation ministry. In other words, we are brought back into relationship with Jesus so we can bring people back into relationship with us. And thus, not be lonely. Because we have relationships that matter. I don't know about you, but that's good news to me. God's grace really is amazing. I know we use that phrase a lot. By God's grace, we are set free for living life at its fullest. How many of you want more out of life? How many of you think that there's more to have out of life? See, those things go hand in hand, and without grace, you're dead. You can't have anything. There's no more to have. By God's grace, we are set free from our past, from our sin, from our bad attitudes, from our hurtful ways. Any of you ever do anything hurtful to anybody else? Did anybody ever fess up to doing it on purpose? I know, it's kind of scary. Fact of the matter is, most of us probably should have their hands up now because that driver who cut us off, we know that. Besides which, my car is probably faster. So I'll just show it. Any of you ever utter words like that? Yes, you have. By God's grace, we are reconciled in our relationships with Him so we can be reconciled to one another. By God's grace, we can have attitudes of thanksgiving and generosity. By God's grace, we are saved to serve, to see those who, as Beth read, are hungry and feed them. We can see those who are thirsty and give them something to drink. We can see those who are a stranger and welcome them into our midst. We can see those who are sick and take care of them. We can see those who are in prisons. And I don't mean just the kind that have bars. Because there are a lot of prisons out there. Most of them are here and need our visits. By the grace of our chosen King, by the grace of our chosen King, everything changes. Because God's radical act changes